It is just a huge honor for me today to be podcast interviewing Dr. Harold Wong. Thank you so much for coming over. Dr. Harold Wong is a tax consultant and financial educator whose primary goal is to increase retirement cash flow, reduce investment risk, and save taxes for baby boomers and retirees. Dr. Harold Wong, Ph.D. in Economics at UC Berkeley, is a recognized expert speaker to national active and retired federal employees, has appeared on more than 400 plus TV and radio programs, published in Forbes, USA Today, and a columnist on money for the Arizona Republic for 7 years with syndication over 1,600 news outlets. He just lectured at the Arizona State Dental Association. He gave 2 hour-and-a-half programs, and everybody was mesmerized. You are beyond smart, and it's such an honor for you to come over to talk to all of our homies today. So you talk about how tax savings and alternative investments can help dentists retire early. What is it? We hear a lot that after the 2008 financial meltdown, a lot of dentists had to put off their retirement for years.
Absolutely true. In fact, I wrote a book that summarized 40 years of advanced tax and financial strategies I've used. It's just called Why Tax Savings and Alternative Investments Beat Wall Street. Everything I do is based on research. There's no BS. There's no Wall Street hype. And here's one of the problems in retirement, whether you be a dentist or otherwise. 99% of all the advisors you would see are tied only to Wall Street, which means they're selling stocks, bonds, or mutual funds composed of the two. It's shocking that you've been told your whole life that you can average 10 to 12% of the stock market. That's what Wall Street has claimed for decades. And yet everything I do is based on research. If you start at the beginning of this century, January 1st, 2000, what we had, if you look at the first 16 years of the century, we had the dot-com crash, 2000, 2001, 2002, the market went down. Then we had the fake boom in the stock market caused by the fake boom in real estate, caused by the government, and I'll cover that later.
Yeah.
And then we had the 2008 crash in the stock market caused by the collapse of real estate prices, and now we have the fake boom in the stock market. But if you held on and you never panicked, for the first 16 years of this century, in the S&P 500, you average 2.08%.
2.08.
2.08%. So if I've been able to go back in a time machine, like that movie Back to the Future, and I go back to January 1, 2000, and I tell people, I'm from the future. I know exactly what's going to happen. You're going to have 2 crashes, and you're going to have 2 fake booms in the stock market. What you should do is just go into CDs and lock them in at 6 or 7%, or loan to the U.S. government on a 30-year treasury bond at 6 and 7%. You know what? If I talked to 1,000 people, probably not one person would have done it. Here's why. The last 5 years of the century prior to January 1, 2000, people averaged 25% in the stock market.
1995 to 2000?
Exactly.
They average what?
25%.
Oh, wow.
There's only 2 emotions in the world of money, greed and fear. And the average person would be insulted if you called them greedy. But if you actually look at their investment behavior, greed is more important than fear for the vast majority of people. And I'll prove it to you. Even the most degenerate gambler will tell you, no matter what casino game you play, blackjack, roulette, craps, whatever, the odds favor who? Well, you know.
The house.
Does that stop tens of millions of Americans from voluntarily entering a casino every year? No, it doesn't. And they go to casino for 2 reasons. Greed, hoping to make some quick money, and entertainment. And it's the same thing in the stock market, except people are hoping to have enough money to retire, make money with their money, but guess what? They have very few choices. Sure, there are thousands of stocks, bonds, mutual funds, but it's all the same asset class. If you go to and Google traditional asset classes in Wall Street, there are only 3 asset classes. It's cash, it's stocks, and it's bonds. And cash is only a holding pen until the broker can sell you either stocks or bonds. Every 401k, every traditional IRA is tied only to Wall Street investments. Wall Street loves it. Trillions of dollars have gone in over the last years since the 401k was basically took place in 1980. And people's money for baby boomers primarily in 401k all goes to Wall Street. People don't realize there are many asset classes besides stocks and bonds. There's all sorts of equipment. Leasing dental equipment, leasing MRIs, construction equipment like Caterpillar, farm equipment like John Deere. There's foreign currencies. There's precious metals. There's the farm sector, commodities from the grains, corn, soybean, wheat, to the meats, pork bellies, cattle futures. There's all sorts of real estate formulas out there, from single-family houses to apartments, office buildings, industrial warehouses, hotels. So there's a whole world of investments out there that virtually nobody takes part in because every broker they go to is tied to Wall Street and Wall Street only. See, based on the research we did in academia 40 to 50 years ago at UC Berkeley, Stanford, University of Chicago, Harvard, Yale, and MIT, we found that Wall Street was a rigged game. In other words, we just took a 10-year period and we said, who can beat the 10-year stock market averages? We could only find 5 people way back when. Warren Buffett was one of them. Sir John Templeton was the second. See, Sir John Templeton was way ahead of his time. After World War II, his thought process is, I'll invest in big companies in third world countries on the concept the whole world's been devastated by World War II except the U.S. and Canada. And these giant companies, like the beer distributor, the company that owns the phone system, they have near monopolies. They will grow faster. Now, it may take years before the world of investors realize that their earnings keep going up, their profits going up, but eventually the world of investors will recognize that, and so the stock will go up. And he proved right. In fact, he sold out about 35 years ago to Franklin Funds in San Mateo for $300 million. And of course, Warren Buffett is known, acknowledged inside Wall Street, outside Wall Street, as the single greatest stock market investor for the last 50 years. But what's interesting is in 2016, last year, we had the presidential primaries and elections. What's interesting is Bernie Sanders on the left, Donald Trump on the right said the same thing. They said Wall Street is a rigged game, and virtually every big bank owns or is connected to Wall Street firm, so it's the same thing. They told the truth. Guess what? Because neither one was receiving tens of millions of donations from Wall Street, like the Democratic candidate Hillary and the prior president Barack Obama. In other words, Wall Street plays both sides of the fence. They pay up both sides so they can get their way. And it's a rigged game. I'll give you an example. The 2008 crash occurred. So guess what? The Secretary of Treasury under Bush the son pushed for an $800 billion bailout to bail Wall Street and the big banks. But they screwed everyone on Main Street by lowering the interest rates to virtually zero, taking away the one safe thing that Americans had for generations. If I don't want to take the risk of the stock market, I can put my money in the bank and earn 4, 5, 6, or 7% in CDs and never have to worry about my 401k becoming a 301k or a 201k, which happened each of the last 2 crashes. Because each of the last 2 crashes, the dot-com crash and the real estate bust, the stock market dropped by over 50%. So it is a rigged game unless you broaden your thinking and look at alternative investments. In fact, we're going to show in this podcast interview, if you just save taxes, generally that's enough. If you can really save taxes over a 20-year period, that may be enough to fund your retirement.
You know, my dad used to always sing to me in the car. He'd say, Howie, an easiest dollar earned is $1 in expenses saved. The second easiest dollar earned is $1 in taxes delayed. And the hardest damn dollar you'll ever earn is going to do whatever you sell another dollar's worth.
Exactly. In fact, I'm going to say something that's startling to folks, and don't take it the wrong way, because a lot of people immediately, based on their politics, get riled up. But taxes actually are voluntary in America. They really are. You will pay as much or as little taxes based on your tax knowledge or the knowledge of your advisor. and I always take things to heart. 1985, many observers said I was the highest paid guy with a CPA background in California. I made over $1 million, I paid 0 taxes, and I did it legally. Now, it's not just me. My first media appearance was 2 hours on KCBS, the CBS affiliate radio station in San Francisco. By some odd quirk, I touched a public nerve. I got over 3,000 letters and phone calls, set the all-time record. As a result of that, my rookie PR and the people in the next 2 or 3 years got me on 400 TV and radio appearances, and I set records on over 50 radio and TV stations from San Francisco to LA. But here's what touched a nerve. In 1976, who was elected president of the U.S.? It was the Democrat, Jimmy Carter. In 1976, Jimmy Carter paid 0 federal income tax, and he did it legally. And he also recovered all taxes paid in the 3 previous years. Most Americans leave the taxes paid in the last 3 years as a permanent donation to the IRS, not knowing that you can recover that. Jimmy Carter did that. He did it with his side business. He was a peanut farmer. He borrowed $800,000 from Burt Lance, head of the Office of Management Budget. Burt was a Georgia banker who had to resign from his federal post a few months later due to a scandal. But back then we had a 10% tax credit. So if you buy $1 million of equipment and you got 10% or $100,000 off your taxes, and then you also got $200,000 depreciation. And you can carry that back. First, you wipe out all tax in the current year, 1976 when he's elected president, and you can recover all taxes paid in the 3 previous years. Now, when I was on that KCBS interview around February of 1980, I realized you had to give equal time to each political party. So let's go to the Republican. Who succeeded Jimmy Carter as president? In 1980, it was Ronald Reagan, the Republican. But prior to that, he was the Republican governor. In fact, on my Ph.D. in Economics certificate that I earned in 1974, Ronald Reagan signed it, because as governor of California, you're automatically in the Board of Regents. In California, we have a high state income tax rate, and I passed the national CPA exam in November of '79. And in 1980, if your taxable income exceeded only $50,000 per household, husband and wife together, you got hit with the 11% state income tax rate, one of the highest in the nation. Guess what? There were years as governor of California where Ronald Reagan didn't pay any state income tax. How did he do it? He had a side business. It was his cattle ranch. Now, it's virtually impossible to show a profit with maybe 20 head of cattle when you deduct the cars, the trucks, the equipment, and the housing. Now, if you remember when Ronald Reagan was president, he would go back to the Western White House, which is the ranch in Santa Barbara, and he would bring Secretary of Commerce Malcolm Baldrige with him, and he would never be wearing a suit. He would be chopping wood. He'd have the Secretary of Commerce chopping wood, getting up the horse, off the horse. Even though it's virtually impossible to make a profit, guess what? He had a special thing. And if it's a side business, if you do it correctly, you can deduct part of your car, your truck, your entertainment. But with the ranch, you have the special ranch hand exception. You get to deduct your groceries. Because on a ranch, in the old days, you're not close to McDonald's. So you got to cook. And then Cookie, the typical nickname in Westerns for a cook, will ring that triangle to let all the cowboys know that dinner's ready. But think about it. If you can deduct your vehicles, your housing, your clothes, because you have to have certain working clothes for a cattle ranch, your food, your entertainment, your trips, that's basically your insurance. That's basically what composes most of what Americans spend. And if you can deduct it, all that, your taxable income gets to very little. Now, there are advanced tax strategies as well that work for dentists that are rarely used. The defined benefit pension plan. What if I told you, if you're 55 and you wanted to retire in 65, that instead of being limited to 5,500 plus 1,000 catch-up, or 6,500 annual deduction in IRA, or deduct 18,000, and if you're 50 or above, another 6,000 or 24,000 in 401k. What if I told you that one of the secret tax strategies we use is the defined benefit pension plan, where if you net 300,000 and say you're 55 or 60, I have clients that will deduct 150,000 a year into that. So it makes a big difference. In fact, the tax savings are huge. Let's suppose you can earn 7% in investments. And let's say we only save 15,000 a year of tax and do that for 20 years. That's going to amount to 716,000 more in your retirement fund. If you can save 30,000 a year, that's going to be 1.4 million. And for most general dentists, that's about all they have saved by the time they retire. We can do that just through the tax savings. So tax savings can be very important. And if you're a real entrepreneur as a dentist, and in fact, just last week I saw someone, a very young, aggressive guy, 38. It's no surprise he's from Asia. Asian immigrants are very aggressive because we see the opportunities in this country. He's bought 5 dental practices, merged it into one side on the west side of town. So an entrepreneur like that, suppose he can sell out, let's say when he retires, then each dental practice is worth about $1 million. So he sells for $5 million, he's depreciated out everything, and let's say he's got a $4 million taxable gain. Normally you would have to pay over $1 million of federal tax. It'd be 20% long-term capital gains, 3.8% net investment, 0.9% extra Obamacare tax, basic extra Social Security tax, plus Arizona. Well, guess what? When you finally cash in, if you're an entrepreneur, what if I told you you could sell and not pay any tax at all, using advanced concepts like a Rockefeller Trust? And people say, it can't possibly be true. Let me give you one example, and I don't want you to get politically riled. What if I told you there's a well-known political family known not just in the U.S., but internationally for 30 years? In fact, they used to live in the White House. It's the Clintons. And what if I told you in the last 5 to 10 years, they received $1 or $2+ billion, much of it from Middle Eastern governments that hate our guts and finance terrorists to kill us either in our countries or on the field of battle. And not a penny of it was taxable. It's the Clinton Foundation. So when people say advanced tax strategies don't work, it's just because they don't have a CPA, an attorney that knows these advanced strategies. In fact, my experience is 99.99% of CPAs and attorneys have no idea that these big boy strategies work. How do I know about it? Well, I came to Arizona 25 years ago in September of '92 for a 2-year research project. I came from UC Berkeley. I was funded by Prudential and a large stock brokerage firm to study advanced estate planning and asset protection. And for a year, I was lucky enough to write the column in a legal publication. It was a failed attempt to educate 7,000 Arizona attorneys on advanced stuff. For example, 1 month, I would write on limited liability companies, which had just become legal in California, and were not yet legal in Arizona and the rest of the country. Whether people realize it or not, almost every trend starts in California. Good trends like Silicon Valley. It could only exist in the Bay Area. Revolutionary Bay Area, where you'd imagine a world that didn't exist and then go create it, like Steve Jobs his dream was to have a personal computer in every home. But it's also bad trends. Bad trends like Paris Hilton and Lindsay Lohan, where all the kids think that's the cool way to be. Take off your clothes and display that on social media. So we have both good and bad coming out of California. And now, for those dentists that have not saved and they're 50 or 55 and they say, how in the world, I'm a specialist, I'm making $300,000 to $400,000 a year, but I've got almost nothing. I had 2 divorces. I'm paying 2 sets of alimony, 2 sets of child support. How in the world am I going to be able to retire? Well, just take an example. If we can put $120,000 to $150,000 a year in a defined benefit pension plan, and you save $50,000 a year, and you earn 7% on that, that's going to amount to about $2.2 million, just from the tax savings.
From age 50 to 65?
For age 50 to 70.
Oh,
Give me
50 to
20
70.
years
50 to
of
70.
saving $50,000 a year. and earn 7% of that, that's going to be 2.2
Which
million.
do you think will bring you more happiness? Early retirement or divorce and delayed retirement?
Well, here's what I tell all of my clients. Having a lot of money will not necessarily make you happy. Happiness is something internal, comes from good relationships, hopefully with family or good friends, hobbies that you're passionate about. Like only fishermen will get up at 3 in the morning and drive 3 hours to that fishing hole in the middle of the rain so that they're first one putting their fishing line in and they catch all the trout. Only golfers will get up 4 in the morning, raining, miserably cold, because they got the first tee time at 6. They can play it and they're not slowed up by amateurs, that are shoot 30 over par, slowing them down. That's an example of passion or causes that you believe in, whether it be your church, whether it be an animal shelter where you're saving animals. That's happiness and internal satisfaction. However, I will tell you, not having enough money to where you can cover the basics of your existence, that will absolutely cause unhappiness. I'll give you a quote from Warren Buffett. I'm the only one in town that gives a 2-hour seminar, Lessons from Warren Buffett. If I could be frank, and I'm always frank, and particularly this is a sophisticated audience of dentists who've been around. Many of you have made bad investments or been scammed by Wall Street. And so let me be frank with you. Warren Buffett says he knew a lot of people before they became rich, and they were total assholes. Once they become multimillionaires, they became a bigger asshole. Money is just like an amplifier. It amplifies your true character inside.
Kind of like alcohol then, huh?
Absolutely. And people say, oh, I was out of my mind when I got in that fight and I hurt people. No, it was your true instinct. It's just that alcohol lifted the governor, and let your true instinct come out. Absolutely. So Warren Buffett's an interesting guy.
Yeah, I went to undergrad in Omaha.
Okay.
And he was in Omaha. Mm-hmm. And he came and lectured freshman year, I believe it was 1980, in the evening, where I had to go to get extra credit points. And we used to drive by his house. I mean, the guy, the one thing I learned the most from Warren Buffett is he lived below his means. I mean, he still lives in that house.
He's lived in the same house he bought in 1958, so it's basically about 50 years. He paid $31,000 for it. About 10 years ago, he donated his own personal car to his daughter's charity. His daughter's cause in her life is to protect and help battered teenagers, women, and battered women. And his own personal car was an old Lincoln Town car worth less than $10,000. But he kept the license plate. The license plate said thrifty. For decades, Warren Buffett bought his clothes at Goodwill and the Salvation Army. I use live examples of people that are from Omaha that knew Warren Buffett's mom, his first wife, his second wife, knew Warren Buffett's kids, and they said, if Warren Buffett saw a certain item of clothing at the Goodwill and Salvation Army and you want it, don't get in his way. He would just run right over and grab that. In fact, the most recent documentary on Warren Buffett was HBO. It came out about 4 months ago. And Warren Buffett drives himself, he's about 86 years old, he drives himself to Berkshire Hathaway. Last year, he was ranked the second wealthiest guy in the world. No chauffeur, drives himself, but he always stops at McDonald's. And his second wife, Ingrid, puts exact change in, and he will buy one of 3 items. Now, the cheapest is about $2.60, the middle is about $2.90, the most expensive is about $3.17, that's a bacon, egg, and cheese biscuit. The day they were filming the documentary, Warren Buffett said, the market's down, so he got the cheapest item.
Dentists, physicians, lawyers are notorious for living above their means.
Absolutely.
Why is that?
If I could be frank, again, the only reason people do that is because they are weak internal values. Let me explain. For decades, the standard, and let's go back 40 years ago, the standard in blue jeans of a name brand was Levi's. And Levi's back then maybe cost $15. They were durable, and there's a little red tag in the right side of the pocket. Normally you couldn't see the tag if you had a wallet in it. And I read an interview about 40 years ago from 3 Israeli guys that started Jordache jeans. People in my seminar that are baby boomer age remember the women say Jordache would charge over $100 for some of the jeans. Now here's the gist of the interview. And these Israeli brothers said, only in America are people so stupid that they'll pay 5 or 6 times what the standard is, which is Levi's, and wear a big billboard on their butt, which is the Jordache label advertising their jeans. Well, it's not true that only in America that people are that stupid. This whole designer craze has gone over the world, including Asia, South America, the Middle East, Europe. But that's why immigrants come to this country, and it's a land of opportunity. It shouldn't be a land of handout. It's a land of opportunity. So they come here, they realize how weak Americans are with the internal values, and they make a fortune. In other words, there's no reason to buy any designer brand of anything. The only reason you do that is you're trying to impress someone else. That's the only reason.
They even do it in cars. The Lexus car is the same as the Toyota, the Toyota 4Runner?
Oh, no, I'll give you an example. I know that because I have a Lexus ES300. In fact, I wrote an article. For 7 years, I wrote the only column on money in the Arizona Republic, community section.
For years you wrote it?
For over 7 years.
I love that column.
And about 4 or 5 years ago, on Thanksgiving, I wrote an article. If you buy cars like a Chinese immigrant, you're going to have at least an extra $400,000 in your retirement account. So let's talk about the Lexus since you brought it up. I own a 1998 Lexus ES300, but 95% of the parts are the same as a Toyota Camry. But I didn't pay the brand new price. I bought it. Right now it's 19 years old. Next year it'll be 20 years old. I bought it when it was 8 years old. I paid $8,500. When you count for the fact that I didn't pay sales tax, my license fee and tags are way lower and the insurance way lower, I paid 1/4 of what the original owner had paid for it. It was $8,500 capital cost, and it had 85,000 miles. And now it's 234,000 miles. It's engineered, because I researched things carefully, it's engineered to go 300,000 miles on the original power plant, which is your transmission and engine. So now the car before that I was doing an immigration project in the late 80s that helped hundreds of thousands of immigrants. And doing that for virtually no money. It's just I had the right skill set when the immigration law tightened up. And if people did not apply for legal status, they were banned for either 2 years, 20 years, or banned for life. Now, my 1984 Saab Turbo that I had bought new in San Francisco died. I was doing this immigration project. I didn't have time to look for a car. I met a guy at the Scottsdale Chamber of Commerce. He was selling 6 cars to raise $15,000 to buy a framing machine for his body shop so he could straighten wreck cars and be in that business. And one of those cars was selling his mom's car out of Minneapolis. It was a 1987 Volvo 240 DL with lots of dents. It had 110,000 miles on it. I paid $2,800 for it. And I got it up to 255,000 miles before the motor mounts dropped so you couldn't get the oil filter out. Luckily, to avoid the hassles of disposing it, I was able to sell it back to him and give me $300. And he fixed it up and found a good home where he sold it to some student at ASU. But let's look at the math. I went from 110,000 to 255,000 miles, 145,000 miles. My capital cost was the $2,800 I paid for it, minus the $300 I sold it for, $2,500. And as I say in my seminars, when you work the math, I got like 62 miles to the dollar. Everyone else talks about miles per gallon of gas. I'm talking about capital costs. So imagine your sons, and I'm looking at your 2 sons that are taping this. Suppose it's Saturday, and they need to borrow your car, Howard, to go out there and date. So you reach into a couch and you find 50 cents, 2 quarters. And and you tell your sons, bring it back fully gassed up. But the capital cost for that 50 cents will cover you for 30 miles, which is more than enough for their day. So if you buy cars, this, by the way, the 84 Saab Turbo, the 87 Volvo 240DL, and now the current car, the 98 Lexus ES 300, each of the cars is going over 200,000 miles. So again, if you buy cars like an Asian immigrant, you're going to have at least an extra 400,000 to 500,000 in your retirement account.
I think a lot of their stress of the millennials is they're going to work and they have to produce so much dentistry because they have $350,000 student loans, and then a lot of the older dentists have to go to work because they bought, a huge house and they got a Mercedes and their wife decided not to work, and they don't realize that all this student loan debt, all their personal spending debt really wreaks havoc on their happiness and their stress.
You're absolutely right. In fact, we're going to cover the exact numbers that in another podcast where I'm going to show if you buy 2 Toyota Camrys instead of a Porsche and an Escalade, you're going to have like an extra $1 to $2 million in your retirement account. And the same thing with government house. We've got the exact numbers. This is a second talk I gave at the April 7th Western Regional Dental Convention, and it was called Common Sense Financial Strategies for Dentists. The first talk, which is the material we're covering now, is called How Tax Savings and Alternative Investments Can Help Dentists Retire Early.
And these are your handouts for that.
Yes.
How far are you into these? Are you going to keep going over these?
We haven't gone over...
You haven't started them yet?
Oh, yeah. So we've got lots to cover. In fact, I'm glad you raised that point about the stress of debt. If you're in debt, you're a slave. In fact, if you look historically, money lenders were always in bad repute. Now, I'm not any Christian scholar, but there's a famous passage in the Bible that talks about Jesus casting out the money lenders from the temple. And in fact, in most third world revolutions, whether they be in Africa or in Asia or South America, when the revolution occurs, they line up the previous politicians in power, the bankers, and the criminals like the drug dealers, and they're all shot or hanged at the same time. So that's the reputation that money lenders have.
In the temple, it was the exchange period. Like when you go into the airport and you convert your dollar into euros or whatever, there was so everyone coming in Jerusalem, they'd have all these different coins, and they would always do the exchange, and those were.
And the more naive you are, just like foreign travel now, the more naive you are, you get taken advantage of the bad exchange rate, where they squeeze extra money out of you. Yeah. Again, how good an exchange rate you get depends on your knowledge, just like how much taxes you either pay or not depends on either your tax knowledge or the knowledge of your advisors. But can I tell you why most people aren't getting advanced tax strategies? Here's the reason. About 30 some years ago, the IRS said we're going to give up. 10% of the economy is underground, like barter exchange, so we've lost control of that. What we're going to do, however, is we're going to put in penalties, severe penalties on tax preparers, whether it be CPAs or H&R Block. And so because of these penalties, we're going to turn tax preparers into unofficial, unpaid quasi-agents of the IRS, where they're going to afraid to help their clients save serious tax. So that's what the IRS did, and it was brilliant.
Two things. Isn't it true, though, that almost the entire government total revenue, isn't it like most of it come from payroll taxes?
Well, it's payroll tax and income tax. Very little comes from corporate tax.
What percent, what percent comes from?
I don't have that chart right in me, so I'm not going to guess.
Okay.
But payroll taxes, by the way, are essentially Social Security and Medicare. It's a total of 15.30% off the top. Now, for most people that are employees, they pay half, and it's comprised, they will pay 6.2%, and they will pay half of a 2.9 or 1.45%. So it comes out to about 7.5%, a little less, a little more than that, 7.65%. So the employee pays half, the employer pays half. But for self-employed people like me, or a dentist, you're both the employer and the employee. So you're paying 15.3%, and every year they raise the wage limit to where you're subject. So it's not unusual that people are paying 15, 18,000, and with dentists, there's a wage cap of about 127,000, where beyond that they can't collect the Social Security. But there's no limit on the 2.95% Medicare tax. So for example, if you make $1 million over the limit, because you're a real entrepreneur, you got 5 dental practices, and so you net $1 million, you're paying about $30,000 just in Medicare tax above the base 15 to 18,000 you're paying on your first 127,000 wage. So what we've seen for a number of middle income people that are self-employed, particularly home-based businesses where they don't have a lot of overhead, they're actually paying more in payroll taxes, Social Security and Medicare, than they are in paying an income tax.
And one follow-up when you said 10% of the U.S. economy is underground. Do you think Bitcoin, based on that blockchain programming, do you think that is a serious thing of the future? Do you think it's more of a scam? Do you think it's more of a...
I would suggest everyone to stay away from Bitcoin. I'm no expert on Bitcoin, but it's basically computer algorithms that determine the value of it. We've had scandals like one guy, a big player in the Bitcoin exchange, the whole firm collapsed, and then all the money's disappeared. But let me tell you who and the biggest use for Bitcoin is. If you're a criminal, particularly the drug cartels, one of your biggest problems is how do you move money around where it's not traced and it's not taxed. So if you're a terrorist or if you're the drug cartels, you love Bitcoin. In fact, a lower level of that scam you see on the scams where people call up from Nigeria and they tell Americans, you've won millions of dollars, you just got to send us 1,000 or 2,000. They always ask for a money order. Because if you go to a bank and you're Mrs., let's talk about the grandma scam. You're 75-year-old Mrs. Jones, your husband died 10 years ago, you love your 2 grandkids, and they call up saying, well, we've got one of your grandkids in Mexico, and he's been kidnapped, or he's in jail, and you need a bribe. And because of people posting their whole life on social media like Facebook, they know all the details. They know the birthday of your grandkids. Your grandkid put his trip to Mexico right on there. They know that he's in Mexico, and they can be very convincing. So grandma sends 3,000. We just heard about the news 2 nights ago. She sends 3,000. But if she had to go to a bank and get a cashier's check, hopefully a banker, if they even know you these days, might say, why are you writing out this $3,000 check? Why do you need the cashier's check? Because they always ask, why do you need it? And they might intervene. But if she goes and gets a money order, nobody asks. And then she mails that off, that money's gone. So I would not suggest Bitcoin. Now, let's go beyond Bitcoin. Let's go to gold. In my opinion, gold is not an investment. What it is a hedge against fear. When the economy's collapsing, paper money's collapsing, stock market's collapsing, and people lose faith in their government, gold booms. Gold and silver, precious metals booms. But when the economy gets better, unemployment decreases, the paper assets like the stock market recover, people don't have fear, and then gold prices drop like a rock. I do have some history with this. Without going into details, about almost 40 years ago, a small team of UC Berkeley, we did the largest precious metals trade on the COMEX, COMEX. That's where in New York, precious metals like gold, silver, platinum, palladium are traded. Unlike most commodity trades, we hedge for it so we bought New York, we hedged by selling the same gold on the London Metals Exchange. We did for a giant client, I won't name who they are, with their virtually unlimited resources, we were able to do a major tax strategy. They took the losses in the U.S., offsetting the tax of one of the wealthiest families in the world, including one of the most major banks, In fact, one of 3 giant banks that controls 70% of all the deposits in Maricopa County, which is the Phoenix Metro Scottsdale area. And we took the losses, the gains, I had all the warehouse receipts. They were in countries and languages I couldn't understand. But what I noticed, Liechtenstein, Switzerland, places like that, where the tax rate was either low or 0. So I do have a history with that. And I will tell you, just when you think you've got everything figured, the government can intervene and wipe out millions of investors. If we go back to the end of the 70s, the Hunt brothers, Nelson Hunt and his brother, they were worth $8 billion out of Texas, tried to corner the gold market and the silver market. Then the government said, enough with that. One weekend, the Federal Reserve tripled the margin requirement, and it was limited down for 27 days, and their goal was to wipe out the Hunt brothers. But the trouble is, it also wiped out millions of small people. Now, tripling the margin requirement, and this is terrible. Imagine you had a house that was worth $100,000, and you had just put $20,000 down. In the old days, you had to, unless it was an FHA or VA loan. And then over the weekend, the government says there's too much rising prices, speculation, real estate. We're going to triple the margin requirement. So on Monday, we're going to announce if you do not put 60% down, you only put 20% down. If you can't come up with another 40,000 by the end of the week or by the end of the month, we're going to take your house. How many people could come up with an extra 40,000 on their house? Let's go to modern numbers. A dentist has a $500,000 house. He put 20% down or 100 grand. Another government triples the margin. How many dentists could come up with another 200 grand within a week? No, you can't. So it went limited down. So we were affected at that time on my side accounts, where a group of us at the University of Illinois, Ph.D. economics students, used the mainframe computer, and each of us kicked in 2,000, and a few years later we got it up to over 50,000. Tremendous rate of return. We were one of the first to use computerized commodity futures trading strategies. But when the government wiped out Nelson and Bunker Hunt, they wiped us out as well. So I just want to warn you, even if you're worth $8 billion, no one is bigger than the government. They can imprison you. They can kill you, as we see with all these police shootings. They can kill your dog in Minnesota, your 2 dogs that are friendly, that are comfort animals for your kids, come wagging slowly, and then a police officer who jumped in your yard just shoots them in the face. And apologizes, like saying, I love dogs too. Well, if you didn't, you wouldn't have shot them. So I'm just saying the government has far more power than even multi-billionaires. And that's why multi-billionaires spend lots of money spreading it around with the government. The Clinton Foundation, because of the access to influence. That's why foreign governments in the Middle East that hate us, rogue billionaires and multimillionaires all over, including the U.S., gave them billions of dollars to get access to the inner workings of government. So anyway, all I can say without being political, isn't it amazing that after the Haiti earthquake and all the rockers and Hollywood people having fundraisers, that a rogue rich guy from Ireland gives a big donation to the Clinton Foundation, and by coincidence, he winds up with the cell phone franchise for Haiti. Isn't that pure coincidence, I'm sure?
America is one of the most corrupt countries.
There's corruption all over.
Yeah.
Here
It's extremely corrupt, though. Many Americans think it's truth, liberty, and justice for the American way, and it's usually money is the answer. What's the question?
People have no idea how corrupt it is. I'll give you another example of corruption. When the real estate prices started collapsing, and by the way, in Arizona, we reached a peak of our housing prices in spring of 2006. 4 years later, a totally biased observer had to admit that the median price of a house had dropped 60% in Maricopa County. Maricopa County, again, being the Phoenix, Mesa, Scottsdale area. Why is he biased? He was a Maricopa County tax assessor. Because what is a tax assessor? You have a tax formula, you multiply it by the real estate value, and that's how much tax you can collect. even he had to admit, had dropped by 60%. But the corruption. Let me now explain an economics lesson to you you will not hear from anyone else. And I have a chart that shows where the stock market did from basically, and we'll put it up on the podcast, from the beginning of the century, January 1, 2000, for the next 16 years. We had 5 years of pure speculation, the last 5 years before January 1, 2000, due to the dot-com boom. The average stock market returns were 25% for that 5-year period, 25% per year. And then, January 1, 2000, then we hit the dot-com crash. The stock market went down by 2000, 2001, 2002. The NASDAQ, which is the index for high-tech stocks, had dropped by 78%. So if you've been a high-tech speculator and you were thrilled to have $1 million, and then 3 years later, it had dropped to 220,000. But if you pay the annual 3% fees at Wall Street for 30 years of one to charge you, now you're under 200,000. Can we agree that's getting wiped out to go from $1 million to under 200,000? Well, the government did something short-term, brilliant, but diabolical long-term. See, there's only two places that people store their wealth, unless you're someone like me that's started 11 businesses, bought into others. Like on the real estate side, my real estate company is an Inc. 5000 company, one of the 5,000 fastest growing private companies in America for the last 3 years. But except for a rare bird like me, there's only two places people store their money. It's in the value of their real estate, which is usually their primary home. Maybe they got a vacation home. Maybe they bought a condo by Arizona State University because 2 of their kids are going to school there. I had a client that did that. So their real estate and the stock market. Now, when the stock market loses, say, $7 trillion of value with the dot-com crash, the whole economy is going to tank. The reason is the basic equation we learned in freshman macroeconomics is C, which is personal consumption, plus I, business investment, plus G, government spending, is the whole economy, or gross national product, gross domestic product. We're not a nation of savers. In America, 70% of our whole economy is consumption. So if people lose half of their 401k, they don't feel like buying a big ticket item like a house, furniture. They don't feel like buying a $50,000 car. They don't even feel like taking their 3 kids and themselves to Hawaii for 10 days, which would cost $5,000 or $6,000. So the whole economy is going to crater. So here's what the government did. I was in the mortgage industry at that time, from 2001 to 2006. They allowed liar loans. So if you had a high enough credit score, you could lie about your income. You didn't have to show tax returns. You didn't show the wage statement. You could lie about how much your savings was. And it worked temporarily. So let me give you the choice. Yeah, if you had to qualify under the old system 30 years ago and put 20% down, except for FHA or VA loans, you had to prove your income with 3 years of tax returns. You had to even give personal references. You had to show job stability. And under the old system, maybe all you could afford in 2003 was that 30-year-old house in Mesa. Maybe it didn't have a garage, maybe it had a carport, and you could buy for $200,000. Okay. But with liar loans, if you had a high enough credit score, now the loan officer was gay, wink, wink. You said, well, I think I can only buy a $200,000 house. He'd say, wink, wink, let me show you what you qualify for. And you don't have to, wink, wink, you don't have to prove your income. You don't have to show me your wage statement. You don't have to show me tax returns. Guess what? You qualify for $500,000. So now here's the choice. You've always had your dream home. Your dream home is the $525,000, 3,000 square foot, 2-story, 3-car garage, brand new house in a gated community in Southeast Chandler, Gilbert, Mesa. That's your dream home. Brand new, 5 bedrooms, 3 baths, or 3.5 baths, with a pool. And the loan officer is looking at you and say, you qualify for that. And you only have to put $25,000 down. And, okay, suppose you got the loan. Now, how could you afford a $500,000 loan? We had something diabolical. It was called the negative amortization loan, pioneered by World Savings, a giant independent savings loan that became a bank in Oakland, California. Here's how it worked. So you got a $500,000 loan, and the true interest rate was 7%, but you only had to pay 2%. Have you ever heard of interest only? So a $500,000 loan, 2% interest only, is only $10,000 a year. That's only $833 a month. You can even rent a nice one-bedroom apartment in a nice North Scottsdale location for $833 a month. So it's great. But guess what? The true interest rate is 7%. So you're paying 2%. The extra 5% you owe. 5% of $500,000, your original loan amount is $25,000 a year. So 5 years later, you owe $625,000. But now you have to amortize that loan over 25 years. It's a 30-year loan, but 5 years later, you got only 25 years left. And you got to amortize it over the true 7% interest rate. So your payments will go up 3 or 4 or 5-fold. And how many people can afford even a double mortgage payment? No. So tens of millions of people lost their houses. But it worked for 5 years. So from 2001, when the government allowed these liar loans, it created a boom in real estate. In Arizona, in 2005, we led the nation. The median price of a house went up by 50%. And everyone's fat and happy. People are speculating in real estate. And do you remember the banks took out these big ads? Don't let your home equity go to waste. Put in a pool. Pay for your kids' college. Buy a car. And people did. They used, particularly baby boomers, used their fake home equity like an ATM machine. They took up money. They kept spending. The economy did recover, did not crater until 2006. 5 years later, when these loans reset, that's when we reached the peak of our housing prices. Real estate crashed, and that led to the 2008 to early 2009 stock market crash. So now you got 7 or 8 trillion of home equity that's lost. Where's the only other place people have their money? In the stock market. So the government lowered interest rates to virtually zero for 2 reasons. One, they wanted to take away the bank, the safe place to put your money, because now on $100,000 in a 1-year CD in Wells Fargo, they pay you $50 interest at the end of the year. Chase is even worse. They'll pay you $10 at the end of the year. So you can't make any money in the bank. So they're forcing all the money in the stock market. And what happens when you have an empty vessel in like a bathtub or a container? You put more and more liquid in, the level rises until the pressure gets too great and it collapses. Well, that's what it is. All the money is chasing you by going to the stock market. Bonds don't even pay anything. A 10-year Treasury bond, loaning to Uncle Sam, the average over the last 5 years, only 2% interest. Chasing you by putting the money in the stock market, and they also wanted to help the real estate market come back. So if you had good credit over the last 8 years, you could borrow a 30-year fixed-rate mortgage at 3 to 4%, unheard of rates. So this is what's happening, and it worked. You know, after the 2008 real estate bust and stock market crash, we reached a low in March of 2009. The stock market shot up for the last 8 years, but it's a false stock market because of all this money pouring in because it has nowhere else to go. So that's an example of how the government caused the real estate boom and the stock market boom that went up until early 2008. The crash occurred, and which is a result of the fake liar loans, and now they're creating the fake stock market boom. We've got to remember, people, particularly Americans, never learn from history. The last 2 stock market crashes, the market's going down by a little over 50%. When the next crash occurs, people be wailing and moaning, and they forget it was their greed that caused this. Now, by the way, there's nothing wrong with trying to get a higher rate of return than a $10 interest on your $100,000 from Chase, or 2% is the average dividend yield in the stock market for the last 18 years, or 2% is the average over the last 5 years from a 10-year Treasury note. But what I'm saying, you can get that through equipment leasing, you can get that from real estate. Depending on where you are in the fix and flip cycle, you can lend to fix and flippers that are specialists in doing this, or they buy a house under a price, they know how to do the fix up at a bargain price, and they sell for a profit. Right now, you can if you don't want to learn about real estate, you just want to lend to the fix and flip crowd, you can make 8%, 10%, or 12% on short-term loans that are as little as 4 months to 6 months in term to up to a year and a half. So
What's that Jim Bell's name of that company that
We Buy Ugly Homes.
We Buy Ugly Homes? Or what fix and flip? How do you loan to fix and flip markets?
Well, basically, for years, I was the only one with a CPA background that was a member of the largest real estate investment club in Arizona. And basically, I don't mean you should lend to amateurs. Professional fixer or flippers are ones that either buy the foreclosure auction or they have teams that are people knocking on doors, leaving a little door hanger saying, if you're ever thinking about buying your house, we do that. In ours, they know how to find the deals. And one of the best deals is from divorce. The median life of a marriage is only 5 years in America. Half of marriages last for more than 5 years, half last less.
Mine lasted 20. I should get a gold medal.
Absolutely.
20 years.
Well, you're the equivalent of 4 normal marriages.
And my president of my company, she just celebrated 19 years, and she said her goal was to stay by my side for 1 more year than my wife.
Okay. Well,
So mom made it 20 years, and Lori's going for 21. Go, Lori. We hope you make it.
well, for a lot of people in the medical field, doctors, dentists, sort of, if you are lucky enough to have an office manager that takes care of the finances and runs the back office details, you're lucky. In the field, we call them, that's your office wife. Okay? Whether they may cross over, be romantic, that may be your second or third wife, but that's your office wife. But yeah, so let's take an example of a big subdivision that's got 3,000 homes. Well, by the way, people in Arizona is much more fluid, transitory than even flaky California. So guess what? The median life of marriage is less than 5 years in Arizona. But let's stick with 5 years. So you got 3,000 homes there, and if people, the median life of marriage is 5 years, 5 years into 3,000 homes, there's 600 divorces. A lot of them are bitter divorces where no one wants the house, and they're not that worried about the price they sell it because they want to make sure the other spouse doesn't benefit. It's terrible. So that's where a lot of the deals come from. So they buy the house, but then they need money to fix it up, or they need money to close. At the foreclosure auction, if you have the winning bid, you're not even allowed to bid unless you got a $10,000 cashier's check. But then you got to pay off the total price of the house 24 hours later. So there are people to lend. They're also known in the industry as hard money lenders, and they'll lend sometimes at 15% interest because they got to have the money to close out the house. Now, 15% interest sounds like a lot, but if you're a professional fix and flipper in a strong market, like we have now, where there's a lack of houses to buy compared to demand, you'll fix that thing up in only 2 months. And then you can, from the time you buy it to the time you sell it, because houses go to market, they don't last for more than a month or 2 months if they're priced properly. You can be in and out of that house in 4 months. So even if you're paying 15% interest, it's not that much. So if you had to borrow, for example, I'll just throw out a bigger number. You had to borrow $100,000 and you're paying 15% interest, that's $15,000 a year. But if you're only paying it for 4 months, that's a third of $15,000. That's only $5,000 interest you're paying. And you didn't have to go through all the closing costs. Where every homeowner knows just to borrow for a normal mortgage or to refinance, you're paying $5,000 of closing costs between title fees, points on your loan, title insurance, all that stuff. So, yeah, there's a whole industry where you can lend to fix and flippers. In fact, there are 6 different real estate formulas. With my company, and I don't want to talk about my company, for any fully integrated creative real estate company, you just lend to them. Or there's a staple, own a pool of single family houses for they're rented. Or there's apartment buildings, there's office buildings, there's mini storage. And can I tell you, you make the most money on hotels. My partners and I control 57% of all the full-service hotel rooms in the airport submarket. The Crown Plaza, the Holiday Inn and Suites, the Phoenix Airport Hilton. We're doing
You mean in Phoenix?
right in Phoenix. We're doing an $8 million rehab on the Tucson Hill in the east. We got the Hampton Inn, the only hotel next to the Talking Stick Resort. You can enjoy everything at 101 and Indian Bend / Talking Stick Way. Talking Stick Resort does millions of advertising nationally, statewide, locally. Takes out full-page ads in the Arizona Republic, which is the largest newspaper in Arizona. As I say in my seminars, they spend millions of advertising so we don't have to. We get all their overflow. And it's wonderful, all the attractions there. We're next to Top Golf, which is on Saturday. You got to wait 3 hours to give them money to get in there. They make a ton of money. So you can walk across the parking lot to the Talking Stick Resort, enjoy everything there, then stay with us for less. You can be at Top Golf, stay with us. Just up the 101 is the Butterfly World, the new aquarium, Odyssey, where you can swim with the dolphins. Just on the west side of the freeway, we're on the east side, is the Salt River Field, the new spring training facility for the local team, the Arizona Diamondbacks. We got all the attractions. We're the only hotel there. So that's an example of location, location, location. It's a cash cow.
What blows my mind about that, I did the Arizona Ironman 3 years in a row. And so my bike rides are usually 45 miles every other day. And if I go south, I go by that casino. And if I go north, I go by Talking Sticks.
Mm-hmm.
And we usually leave at dark at like 5 in the morning. And their parking lots are filled.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, no matter when you drive by those casino parking lots, they're filled with just people in there throwing their money away. It's crazy.
Isn't it a great business? Even Top Golf. I work with a young guy who works for a commercial data firm. That's how we get a list of those that own buildings that are 2 to 30 million. And he had his 26th birthday 4 months ago. So he's some buddies. He's unmarried, went to Top Golf. It was a 3-hour wait to get in. Now that's a business where people are waiting 3 hours to give you money. But again, we are right there, and every deal has its own story.
So your website is Dr. Harold Wong, WONG.com.
Dr. not spelled out doctor, drharoldwong.com.
Now you have 3 locations in Arizona. You're up in Scottsdale, Phoenix, Tempe. What services do you provide to dentists when they go to drharoldwong.com? And is it mostly Arizona, or do you take clients from the rest of the 50 states and Canada?
Right now, it's mainly Arizona for this reason. I'm not like these stockbrokers where you call a call center, there are thousands there at Scottrade or Schwab or Fidelity, and you give them your life savings, and you will never ever meet a live person there ever in your life. I'm old-fashioned. I'm hands-on. The normal process we do for retirement planning is people will see me for anywhere from 3 to 5 2 to 3 hour sessions. Now, I don't charge for this, and you're fortunate. 30-some years ago in California, you had to give me $5,000 up front just to sit down, and it was 20%. You signed a 5-year contract, it was 20% of the taxes saved. That's why in 1985, with only 20 clients, I was able to make $1 million, and it would be unethical for me to pay tax when I showed my clients how not to pay tax. In other words, do what you should do, not just talk about it. For example, the German guy that had a Bosch spark plugs, Bosch fuel injectors, I saved him $500,000 of tax. So 20% of $500,000 was $100,000 plus the $5,000 annual fee, but he was able to deduct that. He was in a 61% tax bracket, 50% federal, 11% California. So it cost him less than $50,000, and that's why I said it there. Would you pay less than $50,000 to save $500,000? To me, that's a 10-to-1 return. Anyway, but my process here in Arizona is, with a few exceptions, we sit down for the first meeting. That's when I learn your situation. It lasts 2 to 3 hours. You tell me your story, tell me about your business. I learn about your financial situation, how much tax you've been paying. Generally, people send me the last 3 years' tax returns of their dental business, their personal returns, all of the latest copy of all their financial accounts. We figure out what your goals are. We may spend an hour just on your goals. We have 6 goals or priorities, and I ask you to rank them. And I ask your spouse, if you're married, to rank them as well. Is your priority to increase spendable income? Is it the growing assets? Is it to leave a financial legacy to kids or grandkids?
No.
Is it to never run out of money? Is it investments that don't lose? Or is it saving income tax? Of the first 3 or 4 dentists I've seen in the last few months, by the way, number one for all of them is saving income tax. In fact, one prosthodontist I saw, he's fortunate, grosses $1.5 million, nets about half. This past year he netted about $816,000, and he paid $290,000 of income tax. So again, remember, taxes are voluntary in this country. You pay as much or as little based on your tax knowledge. Or
So
knowledge
the
of your advisor.
ADA is saying that the average dentist and specialist retire at about 69 years old.
Yeah, what's interesting, it's the latest statistics shows it's virtually identical. For a general practitioner, they plan on retiring at 68.7. For a specialist, it's 69.0. But here's what the tragic thing is. Only 2% of men who are dentists and 0% of women believe that they can retire early. The reason is there's a little chart from Fidelity Investments, the giant Fidelity that's got at least $2 trillion there. It says by age 67, you'd better have 8 times your annual salary. So what that means is if you're a general practitioner and you average $175,000 a year of earnings, you better have $1.4 million saved up by 67 if you want to retire. If you're a specialist, and I'm using the American Dental Association averages, and your average income is $322,000, you better have about $2.6 million saved up. Now, Dr. Farran, I know you've interviewed literally dozens or hundreds over the years. Let me ask your experience. How many dentists have 1.4 to 2.6 million saved up at retirement? I would imagine it'd be a fair number, but it took them decades to do that. What's your experience?
A lot of variables. A quarter of the baby boomers never had children. I can't say this for my 4 boys. They seem to do well. The number of times you're divorced, I mean, if you never get divorced, you never have children, and you married a girl in your dental school class, so you're double professional income, no kids, no divorce, my God, they can retire at 50. If they're a dentist and they marry a stay-home mom and she has a bunch of kids, that pushes retirement out 10 years.
And you have 2 divorces.
Yeah, and if you get divorced, it just keeps pushed out. By the time you're divorced 2 or 3 or 4 times, you will die at the chair. So my advice when I go to dental schools is the best thing you can learn in dental school is to marry one of those chicks in the class. I always say marry the Asian chick. Because if they marry the girl from the United States, I mean, this is Dentistry Uncensored. I know this sounds horribly racist, whatever, but the people born in America, they don't work a fraction as hard as the ones born outside of America, whether it's Latin America, Africa, or Asia. And I always tease them, don't marry the girl born in Montana. Marry the girl born in Asia, Africa, or the fortitude it takes to leave your country and leave your continent and leave your hemisphere and come here to go to dental school. They just work their brains off. Unbelievable. But if they sit there and marry a foreign-born spouse and don't get divorced, my God, they'll be as rich as they can be.
It's absolutely true. I'll give you another example from Asia. Ever since World War II, it's Filipino nurses by the hundreds of thousands that have come to America that has filled our nursing shortage. I do seminars for the VA employees, like the Phoenix VA. And August 5th, I'm driving down to Tucson to do my first 2 test seminars on Sunday, August 6th, for the Tucson VA employees. And Filipino nurses are notorious in a good way for this. They'll work a full shift, 40 hours, and they'll pick up an extra shift like on Saturday or Sunday. Or if they work 8 hours, they'll pick up a swing shift for 4 hours and work 12 hours. So 2 Filipino nurses working together, even in low wage Arizona, can have a joint income of $250,000 to $300,000.
And I'll tell you another thing my homies don't want to hear. I mean, I talk to you like this because I love you. I mean, I wouldn't even respect you if I didn't tell you the truth. Foreign-born dentists in hospitals, 8% of emergency room visits are odontogenic tooth and origin. Why? Because all the American-born lazy entitled dentists work Monday through Thursday, 8 to 5. You know who the only dentist that does evenings and Saturdays and Sundays in every major city from San Fran to Phoenix to whatever? You know who it is? Mm-hmm. Asian-born dentist. If it wasn't for Asian-born dentists, I bet the hospital emergency room odontogenic, it could be 15%. I mean, even in Phoenix, you can't even find an Asian-born dentist open on Sunday. Mm-hmm. But by God, you go to San Francisco, the only people who work past 5, Saturdays and Sundays, foreign-born dentists. And they just have an incredible more work ethic. Do you agree with that? Or
oh, absolutely. By the way, for those who will view this podcast, we are taping this on a Sunday.
Right on. We are taping this on a Sunday.
I will tell you again, it's not about me, but I want to make an impact in life. And so snowbird season, Arizona has a huge number. In Mesa, the population doubles with hundreds of thousands of snowbirds coming here January, February, March. So snowbird season is January, first week of January to the middle part of April. And it's normal during snowbird season. I'm scheduled 10 to 18 hours a day, 6 days a week. And Sunday, I don't do a seminar. I don't see prospective clients, but that's research day. For over 7 years, I was under the gun. Monday morning was the deadline for my article. It was a half page in the Arizona Republic Community section. If I got things done early, it'd be done at 4 o'clock. At 4 p.m. If I was late, which was normal, I'd get it done anywhere from midnight to 2 in the morning. And then, of course, I'd be up at 6 morning on Monday to begin the week. So,
yeah, and I'll meet a dentist and I'll say, he'll be my age, he'll be 55, and I'll say, what is your problem? They'll go, well, I'm trying to pay for my kids to go through college, and I'm paying alimony, and I got all this debt, and I'm really struggling. Second question. What are your hours? Monday through Thursday, 8 to 5, and I close down for an hour at lunch from 12 to 1, mm-hmm. no matter what. Mm-hmm. Like so all this struggling, and you take 3-day weekends and you get off at 5? Mm-hmm. And then when you suggest, and they always want to go to the consultants to tell them bullshit, like, well, if you put fresh flowers in the waiting room and sing Kumbaya in the morning, you'll be all successful. Maybe not. Maybe you should just try working your ass off for a decade. Work like no man has for a decade. Just try that.
Well, unfortunately for many people in America, and it's partly because we've had a great economy, great political stability, but WORK is a 4-letter word to many Americans.
Oh my God, they're entitled, and they don't even know they're entitled. Like I tell them, I say, I only see this in dentistry and health, in dentistry and government. Like, you go into an office and they'll get there early and they won't even turn the phones on. They're ringing and going to mm-hmm. voicemail. Then they'll start at 8 o'clock, and then their 11 o'clock will cancel. So they're all sitting around doing nothing. And they're going to lunch at 12 no matter what. They don't even sit there and think, well, maybe we should go eat a sandwich in the break room or some way because we lost all this income. And maybe in the next 20, 30 minutes, someone will call and we'll get here at noon. We'll work through lunch. They wouldn't even consider that. It's not even a concept. And then their afternoon, maybe they have a big appointment from 3 to 5. Maybe it's a crown, mm-hmm. CAD-CAM, chair-side milling, and that person cancels. And everybody just sits around for 2 hours.
Well, worse,
and then they're leaving at 5. Yeah. And if someone calls at 4:30 and say, well, I broke a tooth, so now they could mm-hmm. come in for that 2-hour appointment. They're like, well, we close at 5 because we're entitled. Mm-hmm. And then every time the earth goes around the sun, they're entitled to $1 an hour raise. It's mm-hmm. based on astrology, mm-hmm. not even profitability.
Yeah. Well, like I say,
are we just two old guys bitching? Or the millennials all listen to us like, those two old farts just need to go retire.
Well, let me ask you,
I know that's what the millennials are thinking. They're going, they're just a couple grouchy old farts on a Sunday.
Well, let me ask you, Dr. Farran, you say you have 4 boys?
Yep, there's two of them.
Did you raise them on the third world plan where every month they'll be writing a check to you, which is a key part of your retirement plan, or did you raise them on the American plan?
I think the best thing I did is I took them with me to every lecture that was not in the United States. Greg, just say the country you've been to.
South Africa, Japan, Malaysia, Indonesia, Cambodia, Singapore, Australia, like too many to even.
How many times did that open your eyes
Absolutely.
to the real world? I mean, America's 320 million.
Mm-hmm.
There's 1 billion in Africa, and they've seen Johannesburg and Soweto. There's they've been to Japan and Singapore and Indonesia and Cambodia and along with all of Europe. I mean, and I think that really opened their eyes the most to reality, more than anything, more than any college books. So I think world travel, seeing where these hardworking foreign-born dentists came from, and when you go to Cambodia and you go to Vietnam and you go to Thailand, you go to China, then you go to San Francisco and you see that Cambodian dentist working 7 days a week, you're like, yeah, I get it. I see where this mojo comes from.
So see, let's cover that, because when people find out what my work schedule is, they say, well, don't you have any fun? Well, let me explain this. What are the passions in life? I used to be Mr. Tennis in town. I took up tennis at an advanced age 37. 7 years later, I made it to my first national championship, 94. So 94, 96, 2000, 2002. I did something that's considered impossible in tennis. I have 2/3, 2 other top 10 finishes at the national championships. I never played my age division. So in 96, in the quarterfinals, the last match of day 2 of the 3-day national tournament. By the way, you had to win your league, you had to win your city, you win your county, you win your state, and you have to be one of 17 regional winners before you get even allowed to show up to the national championship. So I'm 46, and I draw a 23-year-old, the hot shot of the year, undefeated the whole year, coming off of a 4-year tennis scholarship. 105-degree heat in Tucson at Randolph Park, the public facility. Against all odds, he's got me down 4-1 in the first set. Against impossible odds, I actually win the first set. I win the second set. He's so mad he smashes the place where you have the scores there, and they're all over the floor. So I got 3rd in the nation that year. Now, unfortunately, tennis is very hard on the body. The body's not meant to pound on a hard surface 3 to 4 hours a day. So, after the 2002 Nationals, I can't play tennis. It's called tennis elbow for a reason. Rotator cuff my whole career, had the left hip replaced, 2 knees, knee replacement, bad back. So since I can't play my passion, what am I supposed to do? I am financially independent. Am I supposed to sit home and just count the checks coming in from the hotels, apartment buildings, office buildings, mini storage, blah, blah, blah? No, that'd be a wasted life. I have a gift of the money, and that's why I see people even on Saturdays, even occasionally on Sundays. Why? Because I obtain great satisfaction for helping a family to never worry about money in their retirement years, to be able to help their kids, to be able to help their grandkids with college expenses. Since I have no kids, that gives me great satisfaction. And to me, it'd be a wasted life if I didn't use my talents.
But I know where that tennis championship came from, because you were a Taekwondo champion back in China.
Well, you
So,
know, it's...
you were already a champion. You're already a Taekwondo champion. You just turned a karate chop into a tennis racket chop.
Well, it is true that I started martial arts with a brutal form of Shotokan karate with U.S. Special Forces. And then it took me 10 years after I switched to Taekwondo to work my way up to where I was coach of the National Collegiate Championship team. And then, yes, there's a picture in my office of me touring Asia with the U.S. Olympic Taekwondo team. And my star student, Kim, who's Dutch, started with me when I was 15, when I was only 165 pounds. and he grew to be heavyweight class, and we trained in China. He did win second in the world championships, heaviest weight class. So about that was all in the past. And after that, because the body can only take so much of that, because I did full contact for a number of years. Full contact, I've absorbed tens of thousands of kicks and punches and delivered the same. So that's when I transitioned from that to taking up tennis at 37. And but if I could still physically be able to play tennis, I'd be devoting a lot of time to that, and I'd be trying to win the national championship, but at my age group. But since I can't, I love educating people, and whether it be dentists, whether it be the employees that take care of our veterans at VA facilities, whether it be high-end real estate. People have been lucky enough to have multi-million-dollar buildings, and now their only choice is, do I sell a building and I'm lucky enough to have $4 million taxable gain? Do I pay over $1 million in tax? Do I want to do a Section 1031 trade into a bigger piece of real estate? No, I want to retire, get rid of dealing with tenants. Or can we use some advanced strategies that I've never heard of, like the Rockefeller Trust, and I can cash in, sell it, and pay no tax?
I want to ask you a very unfair question. Your idol, Warren Buffett, says no one can predict the stock market crash, but you and I both know it's in bubble territory. Would you agree?
Absolutely. In fact, Warren Buffett is an index called the Buffett Index. I do 50 to 70 talks a year, and I survey the thousands that attend. In the last 2 years, I've asked, who's heard of the Warren Buffett Index? Only 1 or 2 people have heard. He has a chart that tells Warren Buffett whether the stock market's overvalued or not. You can Google it, and I'll just tell you what the Buffett Index is. He adds up the value of all publicly traded stocks, whether it be the Dow Jones 30, the NASDAQ 100, which is mainly tech stocks, the S&P 500, the Russell 2000, which are smaller cap companies, and he just takes the value of all publicly traded stocks and he divides that by the gross domestic product. We are at levels of insanity. We reached the highest level of the Buffett Index was the beginning of 2000.
Is that in your handout here?
No, it's not in the handout.
Will you find it on mine?
In the beginning of 2000, we reached levels of insanity. We also reached levels of insanities at the peak of our stock market boom at the end of 2007. In October 2007, we reached a peak at that time when the Dow Jones had crossed 14,000. And then we're at levels of insanity now. So in each of these cases, just before a major crash. Now, let me tell you why Warren Buffett, who's the single most successful stock market investor for the last 50 years, it stuns people where they find out his rule number 1 is never lose money. Rule number 2 is don't forget rule number 1. Now, how does he do this? Let me explain the Buffett formula, and then I'll show you how an average person can do it with a different formula. The Warren Buffett formula is very simple. Warren Buffett literally owns over 80 well-run companies that are well-managed. He owns them lock, stock, and barrel. Companies he's owned for decades are like Dairy Queen, See's Candy. Geico was his biggest cash cow for decades. And here's how Warren Buffett looks at it. The Forbes 400 survey comes out every year by Forbes magazine. It lists the 400 wealthiest people in the world. For the last 2+ decades, it's usually Warren Buffett and Bill Gates of Microsoft vie for number 1 or number 2. And then occasionally someone else comes in, like about 10 years ago, the owner of IKEA came in as number 3. But anyway, a year ago, Warren Buffett was the second wealthiest guy in the world. Now, Berkshire Hathaway also owns $120 billion of stock where he doesn't own the whole company. He's the number 1 shareholder of Wells Fargo, IBM, Bank of America, as an example. Now, his critics didn't know really nothing. So when the stock market drops and that $120 billion drops by $20 billion, his critics say, Warren Buffett, ha ha ha, he lost $20 billion. No, Warren Buffett looks at it this way. I get the net profit from 80 well-managed companies where I own the whole company. So the temporary dip in the stock market just drops me from number 2 When it was number 2 a number of years ago, it dropped him to the number 4 on the Forbes 400 list. He drops to the 4th wealthiest guy in the world. So to Warren Buffett, that's not a loss, because Warren Buffett says another of his rules of money: do not own a stock for 10 minutes if you wouldn't own it for at least 10 years. By the way, and then he goes beyond it. My favorite holding period is forever. In general, he never sells. He'll keep that company forever. So eventually the stock market comes back. See, virtually everyone that invests in Wall Street violates virtually every one of Warren Buffett's rules. Think about a stock, a mutual fund. Does a mutual fund open and says, our deadline is Labor Day of 2017. Everyone get your money in. After that, we're not going to have any trades. We're not going to buy and sell. 10 years later, we'll get together and see how well we did. No. Your mutual fund is trading every day, every hour, buying and selling, trying to justify their 3% fees, of which almost all the fees are hidden in the mutual fund. So you're violating Warren Buffett's rule there. So that's how Warren Buffett, in his mind, says the rule number 1 is never lose money. Rule number 2, don't forget rule number 1. So now let me tell you how an average person can apply the Warren Buffett's rule number 1 and rule number 2. Obviously, the average person, even a wealthy person, does not have $1 trillion or half a trillion so you can go buy 80 major companies. In fact, what's interesting, there's not a single entity in Wall Street that's tried to duplicate Warren Buffett's formula. There's no mutual fund that owns 100% of 2 companies, 3 companies, 5 companies, 10 companies. No. So let me tell you how you can implement the Warren Buffett rule, even if you're an average person that has maybe 300, 400, 500,000 saved up. You're not even close to millionaire status. I'm going to use the example of blackjack. Blackjack is a game at the casino, and they deal you 2 cards. And then I'm the dealer. I do 2 cards. And if you have a better hand than me, and you don't go bust, you don't go over 21, and ace, and there are different values for the cards. Like a 7 is a 7, 3 is a 3, a king is a 10, okay? I won't explain how it works, but you can look it up and Google it. So I'm the dealer. Now, if you have a better hand than me, I've got to give you money. And you got to place your bet before the cards are dealt. On the other hand, if I, the dealer, have a better hand than you, I take your money away, take it off the table. All the casino games, whether it be craps, blackjack, keno, they're all played on the first floor. Huge crowds, noise. But what if we could play by the Warren Buffett rules? The Warren Buffett rules, we go up to the penthouse, and there's just you and your spouse, maybe one other better. So there's 3 of you. We got 3 waiters, 3 chefs, get you anything you want. And I'm the dealer. Now the rules by the Warren Buffett rules are, you place your bet down. If I, the dealer, have a better hand than you, I'm not allowed to take 1 penny of your bet. You're guaranteed you can't lose money. What do you have to give up in exchange? If you have a better hand than me, you win the bet, I got to give you money. But I only give you 30, 35, 40, 45, or 50% of what the normal win is. So I just looked at the first 16 years of this century, starting in January 1, 2000. If you start with 100,000 in S&P 500, but you're paying the 3% average fees at Wall Street, whether it be Merrill Lynch or Edward Jones with the one-man stockbroker in the strip shopping center, their goal for the last 3 decades is to make at least 3% off your account. Your 100,000 16 years later would become $85,437. In contrast, if you get 45% of what the S&P 500 did, but you get none of the losses, so if the stock market stays stable or drops, you have no loss to your principal. If the stock market goes up, you get 45% of gain. You'll have $187,827. In ours, you're $102,000 ahead. There is a way to do this. It's working with certain option contracts, where every year you take a 1-year option in the S&P 500. And if you don't want to figure out how to do it, there are entities that can do this for you.
I just want to make one point on the most popular thread on Dental Town. It's called 3% can retire at age 60. It has 242,000 views, and this already it's been going for years. I would give anything. I'll open this. It's called 3% Can Retire, and I'll forward this. What email do you want me to?
Send it to Harold HAROLD underscore Wong WONG at
Harold-
hotmail.com. Harold HAROLD underscore
Okay, Harold Wong
Harold underscore Wong.
at yahoo.com.
No, at hotmail.com.
Hotmail. Oh, Microsoft bought that, didn't they?
Yes.
And but I wish you would post on this. It's funny because you would think Dental Town. Well, it shows you where their interests are. I gotta tell you a couple things. It's the most popular thread. It has 250,000 views, and it's on today's active topics every day.
By the way, I saw in my research to prepare these talks for the April 7th Western Regional Dental Convention, I saw an article from Dental Economics. It said only 4% of dentists believe they can retire well at age 65.
And you know another trick I do, Ryan? I don't know if I've ever told you this, but when I'm on Twitter, I only follow people in dentistry, like dentists and hygienists. I never follow like political people or Fox News or anything non-dental, because I want to see, my homies are retweeting so much of that stuff. So I get, with 21,000 Twitter followers, I get a good sense of what percent are pro-Trump, what percent are pro, well, whatever. So I don't want to bias my own opinion of the market. And that's what I like about Dental Town. By seeing today's active topics, I mean, with 250,000 dentists on Dental Town, on today's active topics, I know where the pulse is.
Could you say that again? You said it's over 200,000 dentists read, what is it, an article that said only 3% of dentists?
3% can retire at 60. It's on Dental Town.
Okay.
And it's a message board thread.
Was that an article, or was that just...
No, that's a thread. But I wish you would post it. So it's a message board thread. This was an article, and we'd love for you to write an article for Dental Town magazine. But this is a message board thread. Are you familiar with message board threads?
Not really.
I'll have Ryan explain to it.
But I'm sure I can follow it. But by
yeah,
the way,
but if you're listening to him, dentists are smart. I mean, the average dentist, if the general dentist 8 years of college, specialists add 2, 3, oral surgeons add 5, and they're serious as a heart attack. Dentistry is a hard way to earn a living. I mean, I was talking about, my dad owned a Sonic drive-in, and the customers were so happy. I mean, they were coming in to eat a cheeseburger and onion rings.
By the way, nothing against your dad. I don't think the hamburgers are the best, but that strawberry slush with the extra strawberries in, that is wonderful.
And I just always saw the best side of people. I mean, you couldn't beat the smile off their face with a crowbar coming in to eat tater tots.
Whereas dentist is totally different. Everyone comes in and says, Dennis Jones, I wish I wasn't here. I hate being here.
I know.
Whereas family practice doctors get a much more positive thing. I may be hurt, but I know you can fix me.
Yeah, when they come in, they say, God, I hate dentists. I go, don't worry, I hate you too. Mm-hmm. We're going to get along fine. We already hate each other.
In fact,
How can I help you?
There's a big debate on whether dentists, like certain psychiatrists and psychologists, have a higher suicide rate. All I can tell you, unfortunately, a dentist that used to show up for the drop-in tennis at Kiwanis Park in Tempe, he committed suicide. My own dentist, only in his 30s, from Vietnam, had a thriving, booming practice. He committed suicide.
Here in Phoenix?
Yeah, right here.
I've been here since 87, and this is 2017. Every single year for 30 years, it's been 2 or 3 in just the valley that I've either known or know of or whatever. And that's just the completed suicides. They don't talk about the attempted suicides. Mm-hmm. And but yeah, it's tough. But after the 10-year, when dentists say the highest suicide rate, they forgot about the Afghanistan war, the Iraq war. I mean, right now we have 26 veterans committing suicide every single day. So dentistry isn't even a rounding error. Mm-hmm. And the other reason dentist was so high is because for physicians, they separated MDs and psychiatrists, which makes no sense. MDs have 58 specialties. but psychiatrists were so high.
Yes.
They pulled out psychiatrists. Well, that's still an MD.
Yes.
So if they put psychiatrists back in with MDs, everybody would have thought they were number one. But out of 50 specialties, I mean, they didn't pull out dermatologists or OBGYNs. They pulled out the number one killing group, psychiatrists.
But do you know why psychiatrists have such a suicide rate? There's a pre-selection. Many psychiatrists and psychologists went into the field to work out their own personal issues.
Absolutely. And I'm most proud of being Irish because I'm 100% Irish, and Sigmund Freud said the Irish were the only ones that couldn't be psychoanalyzed. He said they were so crazy. So that's my bragging rights.
Well, also, allegedly, you have the genetic capacity to absorb a lot of alcohol without having the normal bad effects. See, Chinese really can't handle alcohol. My dad had a bad experience at one company picnic around 1960 at the U.S. borax mine in Boron, California. He thought it was orange juice, and it's 100 degrees in the desert, and he did not know that it was. What do they call the drink where they put vodka in?
Screwdriver?
Yeah, he had no idea. Then after two of those, he was feeling woozy.
So you're saying the Japanese are notoriously known for not being able to metabolize alcohol as well.
But
the
Chinese in
too?
general don't really drink that much. A traditional Chinese meal, for example, you don't have dessert. Even a 10-course meal like a wedding feast, because I've been in Hong Kong for the big feast, and they might have some slices of orange or watermelon at the end. I mean, it's totally different. See, in America, they always tell each other, save room for dessert. We had such a history of starvation in China, we're lucky enough to get enough normal food. You would never waste it on empty calories like dessert.
Well, how long have you lived in Arizona?
I've been here for 25 years. I came here for a 2-year research project. Was going to go back to Berkeley, but
the native. So 1/4 of the land in Arizona is Indian reservation, and if you talk to any oral surgeon, almost all bilateral mandibular fractures are from Native Americans, and it's because they were originally they came up over the Bering Strait, so they come up over China. The Bering Strait came down. So when I go to the Navajo Indian Reservation, and when you go to China, I mean, if you just look at the face and not the clothing, I mean, you literally can't tell them apart. And
they've had the DNA studies that show there's, whether it be Central America, South America, U.S., they've proven with DNA that when the land bridge was there 10, 12,000 years, we didn't come over.
But my point being, they don't metabolize alcohol well. So it's a lot of times they're drinking, and they just pass out, and they fall straight forward and hit their chin square in the parking lot of the bar and break both sides. And if you talk to any oral surgeon, non-Native American Indians, they might get a hand up or they might get something to break the fall. I'm breaking on one side. But most bilateral fractures are Native American Indians.
You learn something every day.
Because they can't metabolize. So basically, before we go, so at the end of this podcast, basically the theme I'm getting from you is that
but
there's
if
more,
I could finish up to answer the question. So basically, when people see me for retirement planning, we have a minimum of 3, and it's not unusual. We have 4 or 5 meetings. The first meeting, again, there's no charge for this. The first meeting, we find out your financial situation and your goals, your hopes or dreams. And absolutely, I want the spouse to be there. Second meeting is I might give you a preliminary idea of what the solutions would be. But see, unlike Wall Street, I want you to check it out. If it's a tax strategy, and we need to see my team of actuaries for, say, one of the secret tax strategies of the defined benefit pension plan, as I said, if you're 58 or 60, you might be able to put $150,000 more a year into that. So we might have a visit there. If you're interested in a real estate formulas, is increasing cash flow, increasing rate of return, decreasing risk, increasing tax savings, that we might set up a half-day or day tour where we tour real estate projects, whatever formula you're interested in. If you're interested in fix and flip, we might show you 3 different houses in different stages of fix and flip, so you can check it out. This week, I told a prospective client, a new client, they wanted the hotel formula, so we had a tour of 3 of our hotel formulas, where we're still accepting investors for. So if you're interested in equipment leasing, we might have a tour of the assembly plant. So when you add it all up, it's not unusual we have 3, 4, 5 meetings. But to see the difference is you actually get to check it out before you write a single check. Now let me give you an example. You could have the most honest stockbroker and he sells you Ford Motor Company stock. The broker has never met the CEO, the CFO, the plant manager of any Ford factory. He's never been on the factory floor. He would never be allowed. You're not allowed to do it. So in the stock market, you put your money down, you read some report, and then at that point you pray that it goes up. When you deal with me, I'm very conservative. I believe you should check it out. The first real estate deal I did was in 1981. I met my real estate partner because I was giving a lecture to 350 realtors and real estate investors at an auditorium at Golden Gate University in downtown San Francisco. And in 1981, our prime rate of interest was 21.5%. 30-year fixed rate mortgage was 18%. Can we agree you can't do realtor real estate? Because who could afford, who could get qualified for an 18% mortgage?
You said that was 1980?
1981.
Yeah.
Who could even afford to pay 18%? So the real estate market, the whole economy was dead. A huge recession. So the first real estate deal we did is my partner moved from San Francisco.
And during that time, Paul Volcker, the chairman of the Fed, had to travel around in a full security deal.
Yeah.
There were so many attempts on his life.
Exactly. And 6'8" Paul Volcker was head of the Federal Reserve then. And we can talk later why he raised interest rate to the highest level in history. It was to choke off the rampant inflation from the 70s caused by the OPEC oil embargo of 1973 when they invaded Israel in October, the Yom Kippur War, and the second gas lines were 79. And it caused a huge rise in food prices because energy is such a key part of growing food and drying food, and the price of soybeans more than quadrupled, over $12 a bushel. But to not digress, so basically no one could do real estate. In 81, we got introduced to a group of tough guys from the South, the Southern creative real estate world. And they gave us a formula on how you could do real estate with 18% mortgages. My partner moved to Tucson, Arizona, and between 81 and 84, we bought 100 houses, rental houses, all no money down. Now, no money down does not mean there's no cash. Husband and wife were my partners. We had to hire 2 staff people, a part-time maintenance person, and rent an office. It's a pain in the ass to manage 100 rental houses scattered all over Tucson. So the investors had to put up $4,000 cash. It was literally no money down, but they had to put up $4,000 cash per house to cover the costs of the operation, which is almost nothing. Again, coming from the Bay Area where prices were high, the median price of a house center was $250,000, and we're buying $28,000 to $40,000 price houses in Tucson. But I'm so conservative that even on my first real estate deal, I insisted they had to fly in from San Francisco to Tucson. If you didn't like what you saw, don't do it. If you can't wrap your head around the fact you're not living in a $32,000 house, this is a business. At that price ratio, it makes sense to buy cheap, and we rent to blue-collar people. A very specific formula. If any one of the prospective tenant went to college, they can't rent. Because college people expect hotel service. Oh, the light's not working. Can you come on fix it? No. We gave these blue-collar people a slightly discounted rent if they took care of all the small repairs themselves. I mean, on our 13-page rental agreement, one page was inventory all their tools, another page was inventory all their skills. If they didn't have enough for either, they didn't qualify to rent. So, again, real estate has very specific formulas that once you understand, it's logic. For example, on our Tucson Hill and East, what we learned in creative real estate is Denny's was our unofficial national headquarters because it's the only place that was open late at night. So after a real estate seminar that ends about 10 p.m., we would go out to Denny's. And the napkins are this size. If the rule of thumb was if you cannot describe the benefits of that real estate deal on 2 napkins, the deal's not good enough. If you need a computer to go figure out discounted cash flow or net present value, the deal's not good enough. So our formulas are very simple. Every real estate deal has its own unique formula. For example, in the Tucson Hill and East, here's the simple formula. We bought it for $9.5 million, 232 rooms. We're going to do an $8 million rehab. That's going to get us about $75,500 per room. Hill says if you had to build it from scratch, replacement cost is $160,000. So it's the equivalent of, after a complete rehab, of getting it for 50 cents on the dollar. Next, we bought it. It was 29 years old. Average occupancy was 70%. But we bought it from overseas investors in Taiwan, taking advantage by lazy-ass American management. What do I mean by lazy-ass? The occupancy rate was 70%, which is average for a hotel in Arizona. You're full in the winter, you're empty in summer. But they're renting it for $25 a night, under what they should. They're not booking weddings. You can't even buy a drink by the pool. There's not a bar there. There's not even a vending machine. They don't book enough groups. So the business plan is very simple. If we can just, after an $8 million rehab, increase occupancy rate by 5%, charge $25 a night more, they'll generate an extra $1.5 million of cash flow. Divide by an 8 cap, that's the average cap rate. It's a measure of price earnings ratios in stocks. A cap rate is for real estate.
Well, we need to.
And basically, we increase the value by $20 million.
We need to wrap this up because if they're, usually their commute to work is 1 hour. So we've already covered their commute to work and back home.
All right.
I really, really hope this discussion continues on the most viewed thread on Dentaltown, which is 3% can retire at 60. So Dentaltown has 50 categories, and one of the categories is practice transitions. It's under retirement planning. Huh.
And you're saying 200,000 people have looked at this in what time period? In the last decade, or?
Well, it's I don't know, the last couple of years, last 2 years.
Well, obviously, it's a huge issue.
Yeah. So that's why we brought you out here, but we got to end this for today.
Sure.
And I really hope this discussion continues. Go to Dentaltown, and then go to practice transitions, and underneath practice transitions is retirement planning, which should have been under finance. What it is a lot of dentists believe that a lot of their retirement is going to be from selling their practice. So it's practice transitions. I'm going to sell my practice and retire off all that income. That's why somebody started there.
You know it's not going to work based on the numbers, because the average practice is worth 60 to 75% of your net billings. So if you're grossing $1 million and it's worth 70% or $700,000, that's not enough to retire on.
Yeah, and $1 million is a high number. But thank you so much for coming over and talking to my homies today. You're an amazing man. And every single one of my Arizona dentists that saw you speak at the Western Regional loved it. You gave 2 1.5-hour presentations. Today we covered one. I hope you come back and talk about the other presentations sometime.
We have, and today we have only literally covered maybe 20% of what the first presentation was.
Okay.
Hopefully it'll become a continuing education course.
All right, let's do it. Thank you very much.